Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are back for another episode of the Buckeye Roast. Q is on vacation, but our guy Pat of Menace to Sports has so graciously decided to fill in for him. Pat, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ron. It's almost game day. Fucking ready to
I
roll.
know, I know. We made it took forever for us to get to week one, and it feels like week two is here already. Things are just flying by. We're already at week two of the season, and the Buckeyes have a massive prime time matchup against Western Michigan.
Why is it in prime time? It bothers me because you know that the Nebraska game later in the year when both teams are going to come in 7-0 is going to be the big noon kickoff, and it's like I want an electric night game atmosphere for a good game, not Western Michigan.
I think it's because the prime, well, what Fox considers prime time and everyone else, the big games are early in the day. We have Texas, Michigan early in the day. We have Nebraska, Colorado is on, I believe, at the same time as Ohio State at 7. But a loaded schedule of college football, and the Buckeyes have Western Michigan late at night. So we're going to have an action packed day of football before the Buckeyes play here on Saturday. A couple housekeeping notes to get to before we get going. A big thanks to Johnny again yesterday for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed that Team Up North update with Johnny Olden Jr. If you haven't checked out his YouTube, make sure you check that out. A shout out to Emily for being the first in the chat yesterday. We weren't live for that episode, so we didn't get to give a shout out on the show. So shout out to her. And we have a winner for our free tickets giveaway, and that will roll us right in to our shout out to the best or to the first comment on the show this morning. So I have a video here of our selection process. So we had a ticket giveaway for Western Michigan on our Twitter. It was pinned to the Best Damn Media Twitter account. And all you had to do was retweet, like, and make sure you're following everyone from Best Damn Media. And you were entered for a chance to win 2 tickets to the Western Michigan game on Saturday. So let's jump right into it. Not only did Dylan win the tickets, but Dylan was also the first one in the chat. So big shout out to Dylan for winning the Western Michigan tickets, and a big thank you to everyone who entered the contest yesterday. So shouts out to everyone. Oh yeah, and a big thank you to GMO Category 6 Sports for donating the tickets to us for us to give away. So despite him harassing everyone in the chat, claiming the U is back, all of that nonsense that we see from GMO, he also is a Buckeye season ticket holder that does look out for us. So big shout out to GMO. Yesterday, some news broke. Actually, I wouldn't even say yesterday it broke because the notes in the outline say the chat had it first. I've been seeing this in our chat for the show now for 2 or 3 days that Sherrone Moore is currently working on an unofficial contract at Michigan. And I wouldn't even bring that comment up on the screen the past few days because I thought it was just made up. I thought it was internet fodder. Word Manual comes out and confirms Sherrone Moore is not working on an official contract. Your thoughts there, Pat?
It is some shady's going on. That's all I know. It's crazy because, they posted pictures on their official team page months ago with Sherrone Moore sitting down, feeling it looked like he was signing documents, which one would believe would be a contract. And here we are months later going into week 2 of the season. He's still under contract. Like, is he still considered the interim head coach now, I guess?
He is. They looked up in the directory, and he is still listed under his offensive coordinator salary right now with the university. And you brought up the pictures. The funniest part about the pictures were the caption was pen to paper. But what paper? What was he signing? Was that an Xbox Live terms and condition form that he was signing there? Like, what were they doing with that photo op? And if they were willing to lie about that, what else are they able to lie about?
Them cheaters up north, they're always up to something. I mean, yeah, you got to. I don't know what that. I mean, it totally was staged Clearly they thought they would have gotten this done by now, but it just looks so optically bad with everything going on now to come out for this to come out with photo evidence of them staging this. It's like, God damn, you guys fake everything you do, huh? It's just like, this is common for them at this point.
So, do you believe that Ward Manuel and the university know something about Sharon Moore's involvement in this scandal, and that is why they're not signing this? Or do you think it's a contention over the phrasing and the buyout of the contract if something were to happen?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I think Ward Manuel probably is skeptical of what Sharon Moore's involvement was in the sign stealing scandal, but I also think, like what you said with the buyouts and all that information, I'm pretty sure Sharon Moore probably wants like a fully guaranteed buyout of Michigan. It's like, well, I don't know if that is going to work if you were, behind all that, not behind all of it, but knew about it. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, do we think Sharon Moore will ever officially become the head coach, or is this just gonna how long does this drag on for?
That was my next question. Is Sharon Moore the head coach next year? And right now, it seems like this is playing out for him to fall on the sword for Michigan. I mean, they needed a guy. I every time I think about Sharon Moore, I saw someone right when the notice of allegations was announced, someone posted the Bane clip from Batman where he says they expect to find one of us in the wreck. And it feels like that's who Sharon Moore is. Like, you got to stay back and take the hammer, apparently, from the NCAA, because it looks like the hammer is coming for Michigan. Sharon Moore doesn't have a contract or anything to protect him from this, and it seems like he's going to be the guy that they take a pound of flesh out of as the scapegoat from that staff that really gets the most punishment out of this. And honestly, I think if anyone should be taking the brunt of this punishment, it should be Jim Harbaugh, who already skedaddled off to the NFL and isn't going to be around to pay the consequences.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, why, if Harbaugh was the head coach when this all went down, how is he not the one to blame? Like, Sharon Moore, even if he was involved, he was a coordinator at the time. Like, it wasn't his job to make sure that to make sure it was put an end to once it was found out about, or if he was the mastermind behind it. Like, it was Harbaugh's job to have the monitor over the team. So why should Sharon Moore be the one that gets punished? I mean, I guess if it's either Sharon Moore or nothing, then yeah, I guess. But how, there's got to be some way the NCAA can punish Harbaugh too. I mean, I don't know, now that he's out of the he's into the NFL now. I don't know if there's a way, but I'm pretty sure Jim Tressel, because we've talked about this before on the Minnesota Sports Show, when Jim Tressel had a show cause when he left Ohio State, he went to the NFL for some sort of analyst role with the Colts, and I'm pretty sure he had to serve a suspension that carried over. So
the interesting thing about the Jim Tressel situation was Terrell Pryor was the only one that was actually forced to carry over the suspension. Jim Tressel told the NFL that he was willing to honor it in the NFL because Terrell Pryor had to receive one. So Jim technically didn't have to serve that suspension.
Man of integrity.
Man of integrity, the man that the Michigan men claim to be, Jim Tressel actually lives it and was a man of integrity and honored the suspension himself in the NFL, and the Colts went along with it, and he was suspended for 4 games. Jim Tressel is not a man of integrity like that. I mean, not Jim Tressel. Jim Harbaugh is not a man of integrity like that. So I don't expect him to do something of the sort. Gene Smith was able to survive multiple scandals at Ohio State in the football program during his tenure. Do you think Ward Manuel survives this? I mean, it looks like Sharon Moore is being set up to be the scapegoat. Most of that staff is out of there, and Ward is going to be the athletic director that potentially oversees a lack of institutional control violation by the NCAA. Is that a fireable offense for an athletic director?
I think if this goes as poorly as it's being rumored, in terms of how strong the hammer is going to be, I think Ward Manuel might not survive this, especially because he's been dealing with a lot of shit that I know I'm, as being friends with some Michigan fans, that they can't stand the way he's operating the university's athletics. But they've had shit go down with their basketball program, clearly with Juwan Howard being a complete mishire, and that program kind of falling off.
You mean
They've
hiring
also
a
had to
guy
deal
that
with,
punches other coaches is a
yeah,
problem?
that one. But there was also there was another scandal involving shoot, I'm blanking on the top of my head, but there was a scandal involving another sport that one of my buddies who's a Michigan fan brought to light to me, and he was just like, we got to get Ward Manuel out of here. So if this is the way to get him out, make it happen. Because I know there's definitely a portion of Michigan fans that are clearly unhappy with the way he's running the university's athletics. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going with Sherrone Moore when this whole thing comes down.
Our guy Mook says Gene's a snitch. Him and Doug Archie love nothing more than to get together and penalize the program and tell on ourselves.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out at Michigan and to see if Ward is able to survive and who all does survive this scandal. We talked to Johnny. I was like, I don't know what you guys call it up there. They call it the Connor Stallion stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how this Connor Stallion stuff plays out, as the Michigan fans would say. As much as I'd love to get away from this scandal that seems to never leave us, even more news from the scandal came out yesterday. Kate Stover was interviewed in the Houston Texans locker room and was asked about the sign stealing documentary about Connor Stallions. And he was asked if he watched it, and he said, no, he's already dealt with that shit enough. And talked about a play against Michigan where the Buckeyes ran a tight end screen out of a formation that they had never put on film. And they were screaming, screen, 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 not even rushing the passer, all bailing into coverage to cover Kate Stover, a tight end screen that they had never shown on film. I saw a lot of Michigan fans say, oh, that proves that we were stealing signs. Though, how could we possibly know a play that you guys never ran before? And that's where their naivety has completely
that's the complete
ruined them.
opposite of what the point is. The point is
exactly
that wasn't run. How did you know that it was coming if it's never been run before? Like it's the complete opposite of what that means.
Exactly. And they want to bury their head in the sand so much and pretend like, oh my God, how could we know? That should just show that we're just that much better. And we just are a bunch of fucking savants on the team that can guess the next play and did this all fair and square. When actually it seems to point to a rumor that we've heard for months now at this point, that this may go further than just sign stealing and has to do with illegal access to Ohio State practice film. We've heard Alabama players reference going into the Michigan game that they weren't allowed to use their iPads. Ohio State took iPads away from players at one point last year. It has been rumored that Ohio State's practice film was compromised. You don't hear a lot of people talking about it. Honestly, I was surprised that Kate Stover let that slip because it seems like this is something to be believed around the Ohio State facility, but there's almost a borderline gag order about talking about this situation because it looks so bad optically when Ohio State has lost to them 3 years in a row and they're the only ones campaigning about what Michigan potentially did. And it'll be interesting to see if there's more information that comes out to the extent of this cheating scandal.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like I understand the former players' frustration now that they're out of college and in the league. I feel like they're able to voice it more without feeling like they're being crybabies back in school or whatever. But as more and more information comes out, I think you're going to see more and more players talk about like, hey, yeah, this is we knew something was up because so and so play didn't work and this play didn't work, and so it's like I think as we get closer to and officially when the hammer drops, you're going to find a lot more information or a lot more examples of plays that Ohio State clearly was, they had the practice film stolen, because there's no way Michigan was able to know that a play that never happened on game film could come. Like, there's no way they can do that without having illegal access somehow.
How bad could the punishments get from the NCAA if this scandal reaches further than just sign stealing and it reaches into potentially federal computer crimes? Because we know Matt Weiss was fired for computer crimes. Most of the stories that have come out regarding that tend to lean towards him accessing student emails illegally and going through iClouds and things like that. But could it have gone farther? Did they have access to Catapult logins? Did they have access to Catapult servers? It'll be interesting to see once all of the information comes out if this sign stealing scandal goes further than just stealing signs. Were they stealing film?
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, you wonder if if there's going to be a substantial ban, like almost like the death penalty type of shit, because that just takes it to a whole other level. And I mean, you've got rumors of, all right, maybe just a 1 or 2 year postseason ban, the vacated wins from the 3 years, the vacated national title. But if there's more to this that involves some serious, hacking, you wonder if some people are going to get like criminally charged or whatever, because it's truly a federal crime.
Exactly, and they keep talking about in this investigation a third party that was investigating Michigan football. And it was the gambling agencies, because Michigan, in the beginning of the Harbaugh tenure, was 33% against the spread. Connor Stein gets hired, and they end up beating the spread 64% of the time. Let me tell you something. Vegas doesn't play about their fucking money. And anytime they're not winning more than they should, just like a casino is supposed to operate, they look into it because something is up, because casinos are fixed. Like, they are meant to make money. So when you start getting hammered and you have a team like Michigan, obviously something is up. And I'm interested to see if they were stealing practice film, or if this reaches further than sign stealing. What do the betting agencies have to say about this? And you talked about it being more than just computer crimes. Is this game fixing? If you're stealing film to gain a competitive advantage on the field, is that game fixing? Because if you're able to improve your odds against the spread by 35% by doing something that's against the rules, if I'm a sports book, I'm not happy about that.
I mean, I feel like there's nothing they can do unless they find evidence that Stallions or members of the coaching staff or people with ties to the coaching staff were betting on those games. Because then you can make a claim where, like, well, yeah, this is, they clearly wouldn't have covered if they hadn't gotten inside intel from these coaches that, hey, we have Ohio State's practice film. We know all their plays. So hammer Michigan, money line against the spread, all these things that have hit the last 3 years. And it's like, all right, if there's ties from that perspective, I mean, it's almost like the guy in the NBA who was like taking his own under and missing on purpose. This is just like the other way about it. All right, I'm not going to take the under. I'm going to take the over, and I'm just going to steal their plays so we can win. It's just like, it's the same deal. And he was banned for life. So
exactly. And faces criminal charges. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how this plays out going forward. And like our guy Goj said, there's definitely more than meets the eye when it comes to this scandal, and I'm sure we're going to find out more. Our guy Doug in the chat is talking about the wristbands at South Carolina. There's people are looking into the South Carolina head coach because it's rumored that they received signs.
That would be another total.
They received Tennessee signs because Michigan did not want to play Tennessee in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see. And it seems like a lot of punishments are coming down more, and more investigations are happening at other universities due to this scandal than actually happening at Michigan, because everyone just ran away. And then they anointed Sherrone Moore the king until they're ready to have him fall on the sword. So this is definitely going to be a story. It feels like never ending, but man, the saga continues. But enough about those piss skunks. I want to talk about making some money. Pat, you're our gambling expert here on the Buckeye Roast. Do you have a lock of the week going into week 2?
All right. I know you just said we're going to stop talking about it, but we got the lock of the week revolves around this game. Texas minus 7.5 is the lock of the week. Yeah. It's not even close. Michigan is going to get their doors blown off Saturday.
Tell me more about it. Let me know what the numbers are telling you, because you don't bet with your heart, even though it sounds like it when you're betting against Michigan. We know you go by the numbers. So what are the numbers telling you about this game that make you so confident that Michigan is going to lose on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's like you can't, if you're going to be a successful sports gambler, you can't bet with your heart. But when the numbers line up with your heart, it's such a good feeling, because then it's like, all right, I can maybe hammer even more than I would because I'm going with my heart and the numbers. But so here's like the biggest things that I'm looking at. it's still early on in the season, so like you can't trust this year's data yet. I normally wait till about the beginning of October to start really focusing on this year's data. So I'm looking at historical data for this Wolverines Texas game. This is the biggest home underdog that Michigan has been since 2019 when they were 9-point underdogs to Ohio State. They lost 56-27 in 2019. That was when Justin Fields went off, blew the doors off them. This is Michigan's biggest underdog versus a non-conference opponent since 2021 versus Georgia. They were 7.5-point underdogs. They lost 34-11. If Michigan closes above a 7.5-point spread, that would go back to 2012 against Alabama, where it was plus 13 was the last time they were this great of an underdog. They lost 41-14 against Bama in 2012. They haven't won. They haven't covered the spread, and they're 0-5 straight up as a 7.5 or greater point home underdog. They haven't done their 0-5 since 2000. The last time they won or covered was 1995. I think Texas blows them out.
Man, you're getting me excited about this game more than I anticipated this morning because, man, those numbers are fucking killer right there. And I mean, aside from the numbers, I mean, I don't know. I don't have the numbers like Pat does. I'm glad that he just shared them. But when I look at this game, I'm like, they don't have a quarterback. And it seems that, like, you see the predictions in the chat. Our guy Gojo says Texas 30, Michigan 10 or 13. And that seems to align with the numbers that you just gave us. Anytime that they're this big of an underdog, they seem to get their doors blown off. Connor Stallions isn't there. They look like hot garbage in week one. They still don't seem to have a quarterback, and they can't stretch the field whatsoever. We also saw, I mean, you saw the RJ Young of Fox Sports talking about Will Johnson doesn't look great out here in week one. I mean, he had an interception later in the game, but it's going to be interesting to see. I asked Chris Drew, and I'll ask you, do you think that Will Johnson has the potential to lose money on Saturday if he doesn't look great against this Texas offense?
I mean, I think so. Will Johnson did not look good the first half, or basically the majority of the game last Saturday. So I think he'll be fine. I'm still very high on Will Johnson. I think he's, probably the best player on that defense. You can make an argument that it's Mason Graham maybe, but I think it's Will Johnson. I think he'll be fine. But the problem is, I think Michigan can stifle Texas enough to keep them in that 30-point range. I don't think Texas is going to go off for more than, say, 31, 35 points. But the problem is, I just don't think, like you said, they don't have a quarterback that can throw. And if you struggle against Fresno State, like, you can't expect that quick of a turnaround against now, a playoff team from last year and a team that has national championship aspirations this year. Yeah, they lost a couple pieces on the defensive front, but Texas is still years ahead than Fresno State. And it's like, I think the spread is what it is, because I was shocked it wasn't higher than 7.5, especially after watching the film breakdown. Shout out to Zach, who on the coach's film room at Menace Sports. He did a great job breaking it down. And the line for Michigan is terrible compared to where it was last year. And that's to be expected. I mean, they lost all 5 of their offensive linemen from last year to the NFL. So if they're not able to run the ball, which is their bread and butter, and they don't have a quarterback that can throw, they're going to have a tough time scoring against any defense, whether it's Fresno State or Texas. So honestly, another line that I was looking at is Michigan's team total for tomorrow is 16.5. Do you think they score 17 points?
No, I do not at all. And
Right?
This offense, I feel like for the first time is going to expose themselves because their inability. I think if Texas gets out to an early lead and forces Michigan to become one-dimensional and throw the ball, that's how this game ends up getting ugly. And I hear Michigan fans talking a ton about, Texas isn't going to be able to run the ball on us. They don't have to. They actually have a quarterback. So if they have to throw the ball, they're more than capable of doing that. And, I mean, I'm looking at Texas's roster. I know their starting running back at the beginning of the year is out for the season. So I don't even know how much that factors in to their game plan coming into Michigan. Are they going to just come out and try to test the secondary and see if Quinn's able to sling that thing around? And if they make Michigan become one-dimensional, I think that's a wrap for the game.
Yeah, I mean, so they had a true freshman start at, or they had their starting running back is this guy Jaden Blue, who had some sparks last year. I remember watching a couple of their games where he broke off some big runs, but he wasn't even their leading rusher. Yeah, it was Jared Gibson, who's the freshman running back. He had 10 carries for 67 yards and a touchdown. Granted, it's against Colorado State, so 6 yards a carry doesn't mean much against Colorado State. And Blue ran for 57. So they had 21 carries, but again, that was in a 52-0 blowout. So I am curious. I feel like Texas has to be able to establish some sort of rushing attack, especially to make Quinn Ewers even more effective against this good Michigan defense. But like you said, the game script. So a lot of times when I'm looking at, and I do this a lot for player props too, but unfortunately you can't bet college player props in Ohio anymore. Like game script matters so much with this. So if Texas gets out to an early lead, Michigan is going to have to pass the ball in order to try to get back into it. And then it's cooked because they don't have a quarterback that can throw. It's like me and you could trot out there and play quarterback, and we might have a better chance at completing a 10-yard out route or something.
Absolutely. And you brought up the name Jared Gibson, a name that Buckeye fans should be familiar with, a running back in the class of 2024 that the Buckeyes recruited, the number 3 running back in the class of 2024 out of IMG. Big get for the Longhorns, and obviously paying off with his contributions already this season as a true freshman. It'll be interesting to monitor what he's able to do with his opportunities this year with the injuries at running back at Texas. Does Vegas have a team that they love this year, Pat? What are the numbers telling you? Is there someone that they seem to be higher on than you are, or someone that they seem to know something about that we don't this early in the season?
Well, so it's only been 1 week, so it's hard to tell exactly. But after the way, I mean, they're very high on Oregon because Dylan Gabriel's still the front runner to win Heisman, even though he didn't really look that great last week. And Oregon really struggled against Idaho for no reason. That's going to be an interesting game on Saturday because Boise State's not a bad football team. And a lot of people I know before the season, it was kind of a lot of people at Liberty, but there was a decent amount of people that had Boise State being that, non-Power 5 team to make the playoffs. They have that dynamic running back, Ashton Genty, however you pronounce his name. He's a workhorse. And if Oregon struggles again, I mean, they still have I think it's the 4th highest odds to win the national championship right now. And I don't know. I mean, just based off of week 1, I don't know if Vegas is very high on them for some reason, but they did not look good at all.
We keep hearing the Urban Meyer comparisons with Dan Lanning and hear that he has a tough team up there. How embarrassing would it be if they go and lose to Boise State and get ran all over by a potential Heisman candidate at Boise in Genty after all of the talk about Ohio State being soft, Ohio State can't stop the run against Michigan? How bad of a look would that be, not only for Oregon, but also for the Big Ten? If we get this team that we're thinking is going to come be a new contender in the conference and they go out and lose to the team with a blue field.
I mean, that would be the biggest shocker of the year by far, more so than Florida State starting 0-2. I mean, so many people were high on Oregon, and even even still to this day, because they're home, they're favored over Ohio State. But I mean, how quickly that line would switch, even if they don't lose to Boise State, even if they struggle. I mean, at a certain point, Ohio State being plus money against Oregon is going to look like a freaking steal. If both teams play the way they did last weekend, this weekend, and the line stays the same, I'm putting all my money on Ohio State at plus money against Oregon because that is going to be a steal.
In the other direction, is there anyone that you're higher on that Vegas doesn't seem to love right now?
So I would say I'm sneakily high on Nebraska, and it's like they have such an easy schedule. This is going to be a big test for them this weekend. Just because, can they handle the hype? There's a lot of hype around this matchup. Colorado might not be a good football team, but will the moment be too big for a freshman quarterback at home, night game against your rival? Like, if they can survive and, win by double digits against Colorado, I think Nebraska with the way their schedule lines up, that's a team to make the playoffs at good value. Right now, they are. Hold on, they were Nebraska. I think they were plus 800 to make the playoffs.
That would be interesting, especially with Dylan Raiola joining Nebraska. A lot of people raised their eyebrow. I know he's a Nebraska legacy. He wants an Ohio State commit, wants a Georgia commit. Now he's at Nebraska. Cam has been talking for a while. They have the money up there. They have the fan support. If they're able to
have a good football coach.
Exactly, and they have a good football coach in Matt Rhule. So if they're able to turn things around, Nebraska could be a sleeping giant in the Big Ten. I have a graphic that I put together last night that I want to get your thoughts on here in a second regarding Dylan Raiola, because he's a guy that a lot of people lost faith in last year, but I've always seen it. He's very Mahomes-esque in his throwing motion, very hard to tackle like Big Ben. So I ask you, Pat, floor and ceiling for Dylan Raiola. Personally, I think my floor is the hefty lefty, Jared Lorenzen. He's the son of a former NFL offensive lineman, but he has a throwing motion and can move outside the pocket like Patrick Mahomes. If he's able to keep his weight down, I think, as Michael Jordan would say, the ceiling is the roof. But as far as the floor, if he's not able to get the diet under control, again, still a very legendary player like Jared Lorenzen. Rest in peace to the GOAT of hefty NFL players. Shout out to Jared Lorenzen. And what are your thoughts? How good could Dylan Raiola be for Nebraska?
I mean, like you said, I think you're looking at a potential. He looked really good in week one for a true freshman, again, against not a good team. But if he continues on this pace, yeah, you're looking at a potential Heisman winner next year or maybe in 2 years. And if he can really show out, and if he can outperform Shedeur Sanders, I mean, the hype is just going to be unmatched around him after this weekend. I really like Nebraska, though. I mean, I think this is another game that I have marked down. So the Colorado is a 7.5-point underdog. Since Deion's been there, they've been underdogs in 8 out of their 13 games. In those 8 games as underdogs, they're 1-7 straight up. So, I mean, a logical bet would be to take Nebraska money line. The juice is like minus 300, so to parlay it with something. But I'm honestly looking at, even if you wanted to parlay Nebraska money line and Texas money line would get you to plus money. I mean, those 2 games seems like, in terms of the numbers behind the trends, they line up really nicely for a little 2-legger.
Yeah, so if you're into parlays, man, take Nebraska and Texas, and hopefully both of those hit. It would be interesting to see the hype train that starts around Dylan Raiola if they're able to get a big win against Prime and them boys at Colorado. I want to move on to a little Buckeye talk. Unless you have, I mean, you're the betting expert, so I want, if we have any more betting stuff before we move on to Buckeye talk, is there anything nationally that you want the audience to know going into this season that'll make them more informed when they're putting together their quit their job parlays on Saturday morning?
I was going to say, I had a Buckeye lock for this weekend, and I think it's the first half spread. I think because they came out so sluggish, last week, they struggled to move the ball early on and then really caught a gear in the second half. I think we see the offense run a lot more freely in the first half, and the spread is 23.5. I think 4 scoring drives, 3 touchdowns, and a field goal is well within reach. And with our defense, I mean, I don't think Western Michigan is going to score. So I think you could see a 28-0 or even 28-3 at halftime. So I like Ohio State's first half spread minus 23.5. I think that's locks. So there's my Buckeye lock of the week.
And if you're new to the betting segments on this show, Chris Drew gave away an absolute banger on the pregame show on Menace to Sports on Saturday with me and Chris Drew, where he gave 2 defensive touchdowns. So these Menace guys, man, they know something about betting. So listen to Pat, listen to Chris Drew, man. We've been giving away good picks so far this season. No refunds, though, if you lose. So don't even come here talking about, we didn't win. I'm sorry. You should have got the 2 touchdowns bet the week before. Sorry, they don't all hit.
Man.
I want to get into some over-unders that we like to do here on the show. I'm actually typing the spaces for our answers because this year I want to actually track how we do in our over-under game that we play, and hopefully we could find a way to get the audience more involved here in the coming weeks. But I do have some over-unders that we set for tomorrow's game that I would like to get your thoughts on, Pat. And if you guys want to play along in the chat, and hopefully we have a way for you guys to interact with us on this here very soon. But our first over-under 3.5 catches by the tight ends on Saturday. Ryan Day made a note in his press conference this week that he wants to get the more targets to the tight ends. 0 catches for the tight ends last week against Akron. Is that something that we see change this week for the Buckeyes?
I'm going to take the over on that. I think you could see a lot of that come late in the game, like second half stuff, because clearly, and I think Ryan Day is going to play into everyone wants to see the ball in Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Emeka Ibuka's hands early on in the season. I mean, they tried to target what's his name, Crackmarack, or however the hell you pronounce it.
Kazmarek. Will Kazmarek, yeah. Whatever. He had that one that hit the tip of his fingers.
Yeah,
a little bit of a debate in our comments if he should catch that or not, but it sounds like from Ryan Day's point of view that he will have more opportunities here going forward.
So I think it's important for them to establish them in the red zone too. I think establish whether it's him or G. Scott as a red zone presence. I think that'll go a long way as the season goes on. 3.5 is tough, but I'm gonna take the over. I'll take the over because I think we'll get some garbage time touches in the second half.
Yeah, man. I honestly think I wouldn't be surprised if we saw 3 tight ends catch a pass this week. I feel like Ryan Day is going to make a point of getting these guys the ball. I'm also going to go with the over on tight end catches of 3.5 after not seeing a single catch by tight ends this past week. The next one I want to get to, over under 99.5 yards for any running back on the roster. We have yet to see a 100-yard rusher for the Buckeyes. We know we have a 2-headed monster and then also a young star as a true freshman in James Peoples at running back. With this many mouths to feed in the running back room, do we get our first 100-yard rusher in week 1? In week 2?
I'm gonna take the under on this. I'm gonna say no, just because I hope it's again I'm anticipating this to be a blowout after the first half. Unless Travion breaks off a big one in the first half, I don't see it happening because they're not going to get touches in the second half to eclipse that mark. I'm going to say no. I'm going to take the under on that. I think the first time we see a 100-yard rusher will be the Michigan State game. I think week 4 is when we'll see it.
I'm going to go with the over. I think you hit the nail right on the head. If it happens, it's going to be because Travion explodes early in the game. And, man, he almost got loose on a couple of them last week. I feel like he has one of those Travion signature long runs in him and where he truly shows his explosive speed. And I think against a team like Western Michigan, I think Travion Henderson's speed might be a little too much for them. So I think I'm going to go with the over here in the event that Travion Henderson breaks a long run early in the game. You talked about Will Howard getting going early, especially with Ryan Day wanting to squash the thoughts of an early start after week 1. Do you think Will Howard over under 3.5 passing touchdowns? He had 3 passing touchdowns against Akron, played into the third quarter. We see him move up in the Heisman odds. Does Ryan Day get a little antsy and try to double dip and get a Natty and a Heisman in the same year, seeing Will Howard getting the Heisman attention from Vegas after his week 1 performance?
I'm going to say, you know what? I'll take the over just because I use this logic when talking about the tight ends. I think we're going to see them utilize them in the red zone and the throw game. So I'm going to take the over. I'm going to say, because again, I think the offense is going to look a lot better in the first half than they did in week 1. So I think he could definitely, I'm going to take the over 3.5. I see 5 touchdowns for Ohio State in the first half, and I'll take 4 of them passing, and then maybe he gets to start the second half of the first drive, and if that ends up, I'm going to take 4.
I'm going to go with under because I think while he may score 4 touchdowns, I think one of them is likely to be a rushing touchdown. So I'm going to go with the under here and
That's
say
fair.
Will probably only scores 3 touchdowns. And Ryan Day did make a note that they would like to have games secure earlier and get Devin more touches. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to do that. And if he does get the backup in there early, will that chew into Will's touchdown numbers? We talked about this earlier in the show. Chris Drew gave a lock last week as far as the 2 defensive touchdowns for the Buckeyes. Man, I don't know where the hell he came up with that one, but gave that out on the pregame show. I have to ask you, do the Buckeyes score again this week? Over under 0.5 touchdowns by the Ohio State defense?
I'm going to say under, but I'm going to say over 0.5 on special teams touchdowns this weekend.
Oh, wow. So we'll count that as a defensive touchdown as well.
Right, I was going to say, does that count? Defense, special teams?
We'll count that defensive special teams like we're playing fantasy over here.
Okay. Did you see the Parker Fleming stat that surfaced this past week?
About his total punt return yards?
Punt return yards. They a big return this week would eclipse last year's total in week 2. Dude, I think Ennis houses one. I have a sneaky feeling that punt return team looks solid. I think they house one.
How much do you think that special teams is having an impact on this team, the juice and the energy it brings to have a guy like Brandon Ennis coming off the field, celebrating, getting the team hyped, because it's not oh man, we just avoided disaster. Let's go out there. And what did Kyle McCord used to say before games? Let's go out there and not make mistakes.
Yeah.
Like those Brandon Ennis is coming off the sidelines like, look what I did out there. Now go make a fucking play. So that type of energy and juice to this team, I feel like, is something that isn't really getting talked about. Ryan Day mentioned about the return yardage and how that's 2-3 first downs that Brandon Ennis is able to add when he gets these returns, and how big that is for our offense. So it's exciting to see this jump that we've taken on special teams. I'm sitting here, I'm like, no, it's not defense isn't a word, offense isn't a word. Special teams. It is special teams.
Yeah. And the fact that Ennis, because he's clearly wide receiver 4 right now, and he didn't have a single catch last week, I think he's hungry with the ball in his hands to make a play. So that's why I feel like he's gonna break one this weekend. I have a feeling.
Chris always says, I like defensive guys returning because they're so hungry to get a touchdown. And a guy like Brandon Ennis still fits that role because he's wide receiver 4 right now, and he's making the absolute most of his opportunities. And Pat, you absolutely talked me into it. I'm going with over. If we're counting special teams touchdowns, I'm going to go with the Buckeyes. Defense / special teams does get on the board this week. I only have one person on this, but I'm going to get your opinion on 2 people. We saw JTT start the season with 2 sacks in week 1, which is way more than anyone anticipated, being that we saw that defensive line struggle to get home last year. Jack Sawyer, tons of QB hits last week, but wasn't able to completely get home. JTT had 1.5 sacks. So, do you want to go with over under 0.5 sacks for both of our starting defensive ends, JTT and Jack Sawyer? Sack Sawyer. See, I'm getting ahead of myself. Does Jack get his first sack of the year? And does JTT, is he able to continue to build on the success that he had last week?
I'm definitely taking the over on Jack or Sack Sawyer. I'm going to start using that Sack Sawyer. It's crazy on Saturday. I'm going to take the over on Sawyer for sure. He's getting home. JTT, I'm not sure. I have a theory that he only had 1.5 sacks because Akron's color scheme sort of resembled Penn State. So I think that's him. And Western Michigan doesn't even come close to that color scheme. So I think we see a more regressed version of JTT. Although I hope he does. I trust Jack Sawyer more than JTT at this point.
Our guy T Spivvy noted in the chat, JTT looking slimmer. I've been saying for years I want to see triceps from JTT, and once we see definition in his arms, we know to start praying for opposing quarterbacks. And you're seeing that JTT looks the fittest he's ever been at Ohio State, and he's moving like it as well. So I'm going to go with the over as well for both of those guys. So, Pat, did you have the over for Jack and JTT?
So, I guess for the sake, so are we, does it have to be one bet, or can I take 2 separate bets on this?
2 separate bets. 2 separate
All right,
bets.
I'm taking the over on Jack and the under on JTT this week.
Okay, sounds good. Over Jack, under JTT. I think they both get one. I feel like we're going to see an improved ability to get home, as that was a point of contention last year as far as the Buckeyes not getting home enough, and especially being in the Big Ten, one where we expect to be ahead and teams to be forced to pass on us significantly more this year. And two, overall, you look at the passing yards from the Big Ten last week, they're throwing the ball around. They say it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust for every team in the Big Ten except for Ohio State. But a lot of teams were letting it fly last week. So it'll be interesting to see how many more pass rushing opportunities the Buckeyes have this year versus last year. Over under 5.5 catches for Jeremiah Smith this week.
You got to take the over. I think, yeah, I mean, he should have had even more than 6 last week. You know, he had the bad drop early on. No, I'm going to take the over for sure. I think he's clearly wide receiver 1 in that room, just based on his skill set. I think now that he has the first game jitters out of the way, I wouldn't be surprised if he has an insanely monster game tomorrow.
Before I give my answer, our guy Steven says, hit the like button. We have 250 people watching. If you are watching on Twitter, throw a retweet on the video. It helps us so much on Twitter and gets so many more eyes on the video, lets so many more people know that we're live. Even if you missed the show or you're watching on YouTube and you see the link in the community later today, go ahead and throw a like and a retweet on that. It helps us a ton. If you're watching on YouTube, it really helps us in the algorithm if you throw a like on the video. So if you could do that, that would be a huge help. In regards to Jeremiah Smith, I think he absolutely hits the over, and I feel like this is the first week that Chris might see a cash out on some of his Jeremiah Smith Heisman bets, because if he's able to add some more touchdowns here and increase the ridiculous odds that Chris was able to get Jeremiah Smith out on the Heisman, do you think that he starts to creep into that conversation if he does hit that over and we see a true freshman with 5+ catches and maybe a touchdown? Or do you think with him being a true freshman, with that being predominantly a quarterback award, it's just going to be too hard for him to sneak into that category of potential Heisman candidates?
I think if he goes and I'm talking like absolutely dummy this week, and like 10 catches, 200 yards and 2 or more touchdowns, or even say 10 catches, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he needs that kind of like he was 692 and 2 last week. Like that, those are great, but that's not Heisman worthy. Like if you want to talk about Heisman worthy, I want to see like close to 200 yards and multiple touchdowns.
Yeah, very true. I mean, he looks outstanding for a true freshman, but for Heisman, I mean, we looked at what Devontae Smith did. He almost had to have 2,000 yards in a season to win the Heisman. So
yeah.
I don't, as much as I'd love to see him get into the conversation, I don't know if the Buckeyes are going to force feed him that much to allow him to do that. But I do think he does go over the 5.5 catches on Saturday and kind of establishes himself as wide receiver 1 on this team continuing going forward. Another wide receiver that I wanted to talk about, Chris Drew and I have been following and monitoring on Bleacher Report the race for the all-time receiving record at Ohio State, and Emeka Egbuka is on pace to break that if he's able to have 60 receiving yards a game going through the rest of the year if the Buckeyes were to make the national championship game. The Buckeyes under Ryan Day have been known to target that slot position a ton, and it being one of the leading receivers on the team outside of the Marv era, it tend to skew towards the slot receiver receiving the most receptions. Do you think Emeka is able to break that record? And this week, does he get the 60 yards needed that he needs to stay on pace to break this record?
I think so. He finished below that. He had 50 last
51
week?
51 last week.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over this week. I think this will be his chance to be like, all right, I'm still here. Like pump the brakes a little bit on Jeremiah Smith. This is still my room, but I think I like you said, I think Will Howard's gonna have a day. I think the offense is gonna hum early, and they're gonna pass the ball a shit ton. So I think Emeka clears that. I would say I would put him around the 70-yard range this weekend.
I agree. I think Emeka gets involved in this, and I feel like they do. With it only being 60 yards, I don't feel like they're going to have to force feed him to get him this record, which is awesome to see that they're not going to have to deviate from what they intended to do on offense to make sure that he gets his record. I think he's going to be able to do it within the flow of the offense, and I do think he does get his 60 to stay on pace this week. Ryan Day mentioned Devin Brown in his interviews this week and mentioned he'd like to get Devin in the game earlier. We saw Devin throw 3 passes this past week. Over under 2.5 passes from Devin Brown in the game on Saturday.
Oh, hammer the over. 2.5, just attempts?
Attempts.
Yeah, I'm taking the over for sure.
Do you have a prediction of when Devin gets in the game?
I'm going to say it'll be the second drive of the third quarter. I think unless the game is completely out of hand, and I'm talking like 40, like the Michigan State game from a few years ago, like 49-0 at halftime. Unless we see that, I think you'll see Will Howard in the first half and then the first drive of the second half. And then after that, I think it'll be Devin Brown.
Agreed. I think Devin is going to get a big opportunity, and it was cool to hear Ryan Day say the emphasis of getting the backup quarterback in, because I feel like Ryan understands the need that, like, hey, I have a national championship team here, and if something were to happen to Will, I need to have a guy that is ready. And I mean, he kind of pushed back a little bit on the call for QB3, because Ryan Day seems to like understand that I can't be thinking about next year. This team is a national championship contender, and we had arguments about this in the comments on the show a few weeks back. And I said, when the bullets are flying, Ryan Day is putting Devin Brown in the game if something were to happen to Will Howard, if he needs to go do an extra assignment for class or something during the middle of the game and Devin has to come in. I think that Ryan wants to know that he has someone that he's confident in and can go win a national championship, and he wants to prepare the backup quarterback for that more than he's concerned about the guys further down on the depth chart. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out going forward. And then the last question, over under 20.5 point margin of victory from the Buckeyes.
20.5?
Yes. I don't even know what the spread is on this game.
Oh, the spread's like 38.5.
Oh, is it 38.5? Okay, well we'll bump the spread up. Your boy was writing these this morning last minute. Do they cover the spread of 38.5?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna say absolutely. They won by 46 last week. I think we'll see a similar margin of victory.
Sounds good. I just looked at the time. I didn't even realize how long that we were running. I'm going to also hammer the over as far as the Buckeyes covering. I feel like they come out and look sharp. I feel like that was a point of emphasis this week from Ryan Day in regards to making sure this team looks sharp on offense. It starts off with a fast start, so I'm looking for the Buckeyes to be able to do that this week. One more note that I wanted to make, the Buckeyes have a big visitor on campus, the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2028, Neiman Lawrence. I think he will be the next 1.0 quarterback that we see ranked by the recruiting services. He is a true freshman that started at quarterback last year as a true freshman, or as an 8th grader in Florida, started varsity, threw over 40 touchdowns, started week 1 of his high school campaign with 5 touchdowns last week, was named the best player of the week out of freshmen in the class of 2028, already has an offer from Ohio State, has visited multiple times with SFE, a guy to keep an eye on going forward, and hope he has a great visit with the Buckeyes this weekend. I appreciate you, Pat, for joining us today on the Buckeye Roast. Q is enjoying vacation. He will be back on Wednesday next week. Pat will be with us Monday and Tuesday. Pat, let the people know where they can find you other than here when you're filling in for Q.
Yeah, find me Pat_Cahill8, CAHILL 8 on Instagram, and Pat_Cahill8, but KHILL on Twitter.
We're gonna have to consolidate those and get you.
I know.
You know what was one?
The Twitter one was taken, so I had to like improvise. The handle was taken.
Sounds good, man. We appreciate you joining us here. If you want to find me, you can find me weekdays here on the Buckeye Roast Live at 8 a.m. with my guy Q. Sometimes my guy Pat. You never know what you're going to get when you show up here. You can find me on Saturdays on the Menace of Sports platform with my guy Chris Drew, doing the best damn college football pregame show, post games in the Bleacher Report app, and then of course Sundays here for the flagship Buckeye BS. If you haven't already, make sure that you check out this week's Bleacher Report appearance. Our guy Mike did an episode of The Fence Edge with our guy Carey. If you haven't checked that out, make sure that you check that out. Shout out to everyone that entered the ticket contest, and a big thank you to Dylan, our winner. We will be getting those tickets to you over after the show. So a big thank you to everyone joining us today. And Pat, you know how it ends. Go Bucks and OH.
I-O.
Yeah.